Hello, welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm counting down the worst movies of 2021. So, 2021 was actually a pretty decent year for film. It wasn't anything like 2020 where all the good movies got delayed until this year and then even further sometimes. But we still had some bad movies that came out. So, I've never done a top 10 worst movies list, but I know some people wanted it. So, here you go. We're going to make fun of the worst movies that came out this year, or at least the ones I saw. I didn't see every movie to come out this year, especially the ones that I knew were going to be bad. I avoided most of those, but I did see some, and there were some movies that I honestly thought were going to be good that ended up pretty bad. So here we go. This is actually the top 11 because I couldn't leave this last one off the list. Number 11. Zack Snyder's Justice League. Yes, it was better than Joss Whedon's version. That wasn't hard to do. Joss Whedon's version would probably be in the top 3 worst movies of this year list, but this still wasn't good. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care that it's got an 8.1 on IMDb. People are ridiculous. The writing was awful. The acting was terrible. It was painful to watch. It was way too long. Nothing was entertaining about this movie. The CGI looked boring. All of the color mixing was dull. There was nothing likable about this movie, really. I wish I just slept that night instead of staying up all night watching it. Number 10. Venom. Let There Be Carnage. I actually liked the first Venom movie. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was silly. I thought the writing was pretty bad and there was tons of overacting, but it was fun. It was the fun kind of stupid and silly and bad. This one wasn't as much. It lost a lot of the fun. It was still fun to make fun of, but just having moments like Woody Harrelson going, "You got any of them interwebs?" as he sticks his fingers into a laptop, but it wasn't enough to make it entertaining. This movie was so bad. Woody Harrelson was such a miscast. It was poorly directed, poorly written. Not much to like about that movie. Number 9. Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. All of the things that I loved about the first movie didn't occur in the sequel for some reason. The first one thrived upon the chemistry between Samuel L. Jackson and Ryan Reynolds, and we kept them apart from each other for a good portion of this movie. We also focused on Salma Hayek's character instead of them, which didn't make a whole lot of sense because people cared about the two main characters, not her, in the first movie. Also, I'll be honest, Ryan Reynolds has kind of overstayed his welcome at this point. He's been in far too many movies recently, and I was kind of over it before I even saw this movie. Seeing this movie didn't help. The movie sucked, and I don't really care to see him just because he's Ryan Reynolds anymore. He needs to do other roles than just playing himself. Number 8. The Woman in the Window. The same man that directed this directed Gary Oldman in one of the best performances of his career in Darkest Hour when he portrayed Winston Churchill. So I thought getting him and Gary Oldman back together along with Amy Adams, who's one of the best actresses of all time, will lead to really great acting. Yeah, the plot is a little overdone. We've seen it a million times, but it should be well done. A well done version of that plot considering we've got this talented director and this amazing cast, right? No. It was awful. They didn't do anything right. All of the acting was somehow terrible. It's one of the worst versions of that Rear Window story I've ever seen. And despite it knowing that it had to be different from that original to necessitate it existing at all, it brought nothing new or interesting to the equation. It just did old tricks we've seen before, added nothing new, and was ultimately boring, which is the worst thing a movie can be. Number 7. Army of the Dead. Well, our old friend Zack Snyder is back on this list for a second time this year. Not looking great for you. I like Zack Snyder. I really do. And I enjoy when he does fun, stupid popcorn flicks as well as when he makes some movies with a little more substance. This was neither. It was supposed to be fun, over-the-top violence with a stupid story and just fun characters, but even though it was stupid, even though it made no sense, it wasn't really fun at all to me, and the characters weren't likable. There was nothing enjoyable about this story. It was far too bleak, weak, the camera work was terrible, and on top of that, it stole its story from a million other different movies. It was essentially just Aliens, which I didn't realize when I watched it the first time, and then I went back to it and realized that, and I already thought it was only okay when I saw it the first time. No, it's pretty darn bad now that I give it a second thought. So yeah, Army of the Dead, another Zack Snyder movie I wish I missed this year. Number 6, Old. M. Night Shyamalan has had a bit of a resurgence, people starting to think that he actually is a good director again because of his recent track record, but I've never agreed. I've never thought that. I didn't think any of his recent movies were actually that good. I wasn't a big fan of Split, thought Glass was awful. I didn't like this movie either. I think it's absolutely terrible. It's got stilted writing, terrible acting, a stupid plot that doesn't make any sense, has needless twists and turns, and is just all around unenjoyable to watch with creepy undertones and just bad filmmaking. Just awful filmmaking. Number 5. Mortal Kombat. I just said a little bit ago that the worst thing a movie can do is be boring, and you would think that a movie based on Mortal Kombat, the video game that people pull out each other's spines, would be the farthest thing from boring, yet here we are. It's astounding that a movie about one of the most violent video games of all time was able to be so slow, boring, and lack any spark in its fighting. Frankly, there wasn't enough fighting in it, and when there was fighting, most of it was rushed through. There was just a couple of moments where they actually took time to focus on it. Most of the time, it felt like an afterthought. We focused on a brand new character instead of the characters that everybody knows and love. We came up with a plot that didn't make any sense, and we completely neglected Mortal Kombat, the tournament that is supposed to be the focus of this movie. We just had a precursor for it and never even got to the tournament. I suppose that's going to happen in the sequel, but I have no desire to see the sequel now. Number 4. The Matrix Resurrections. I don't know what to say about this movie. It's a movie about not wanting to make this movie, made by people who didn't want to make this movie. It's gonna be pretty bad. They obviously had no heart or investment put into this movie. It's just a slogfest for 2.5 hours. Bad writing, bad acting, bad directing, boring action, a pointless story that kind of retcons the previous story and adds nothing new or special to the overall arc of anything. I never was a huge Matrix fan, but this still felt like an insult to me. As somebody who does enjoy the first movie and enjoys the concept of the original trilogy, this was like a slap in the face. It's just awful. Number 3. Malcolm and Marie. This was an assault on all of my senses. This film is faux artsy bullshit. It's filmed in black and white to give a weight to it, but how stupid, inane, and unlikable these characters are, it just makes you wish that you could light the film on fire instead of watching it. The only thing about this movie that was worse than the characters in them are all the fans that this movie has, claiming that these characters are goals, or that, oh, I'm gonna treat my man like this, I'm gonna treat my woman like that. If you act like that, if you think that, you're a terrible person too. There was no redeemable qualities in any of the people in this movie. I hated every second of watching them. I wish I could have gouged my eyes out instead of seeing another second of this stupidity. I kept waiting for something to happen where the characters would be redeemed, where they would say something that would make me like them a little bit, or forgive them for all the terrible things that they've said and done. It never came. It never happened. I hated every second of it, and I wish they would just break up instead of having this stupid fight and getting back together at the end. I wish they had just broken up because they both need therapy. Number 2. Space Jam: A New Legacy. At least The Matrix was self-aware enough to admit and even apologize that it was hot garbage being force-fed to us by a studio that is a shell of its former self, just trying to get money, not giving a shit about making art, just trying to get money based on nostalgia. This did all that shit, frankly, by the same studio, without even acknowledging it, without admitting it, without apologizing for it. It's just abhorrent in every way. And on top of all that, it used The Matrix. Not only did this movie try to survive and thrive off of the nostalgia from the original movie, it tried to use the nostalgia from every property ever by Warner Brothers, including The Matrix, including The Mask, including the Looney Tunes, including any property you can think of, Batman, Penguin, Catwoman, all of those people. It was awful. I could talk about how the writing was bad, or the directing was bad, or the acting is terrible, and that's all true, but that's not a point. The point is, this wasn't a movie. It was an ad for other movies, for Warner Brothers streaming platform, so that you could watch all of their other movies that they referenced in this. Space Jam 1, The Mask. I've already mentioned all of these movies, but like that was the thing. It's like you remembered more about the other movies they were telling you to watch than you even remember about this plot. It was so stupid. It was so pointless. It was such an obvious, greedy cash grab that had nothing to do with trying to make anything good. They didn't care. They didn't want to make anything good. They were trying to make a commercial. Oh, so bad. And the number one worst movie of 2021 is Lamb. Talk about living off the reputation of other movies put out by that studio. This movie, I don't know how it doesn't have a 0 on IMDb. It somehow has a positive rating. All I can figure is that people look at the cinematography, look at the studio that put it out, listen to that foreboding soundtrack and go, oh, it must be art. Just because it's slow, just because it's boring, just because the cinematography is good and it shows landscapes and mountains doesn't mean it's art. It doesn't mean it's good. This movie sucked. It checked every box that you're supposed to check in making an indie artsy horror movie and said, that should be enough. Screw the rest. Who needs talent? Who needs to make actually good movies? We're just following the checklist. They followed everything to a T, but forgot the most important aspect, which is making something good, making something interesting, making something horrifying, making something worth watching. This was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And I understand that, yes, it is a movie, and Space Jam, I just said, wasn't a movie. So how is this worse? It's worse because they tried. I really think they tried, and they failed in every way, because instead of having a corporation try to pump out a commercial or having an artist try to make a legitimate movie, what happened here was people saying, I know how we can make a satisfying horror movie. We have a checklist right here. Let's just go through it. We'll pump it out. We'll make it in a couple months and we'll be sold. We'll get money and we'll be good. That's even more depressing than making a commercial, man. It's the death of film. That's what it is. It was awful. It was no good, and I hate everything it stands for. So that's why Lamb is the worst movie of 2021. At least in my opinion. What are the worst movies you saw this year? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.